So, welcome everyone. My name is Vandana Atara Nora, and I am the host and the creator of the Adult Child in Recovery podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. My mission is to support and hold a safe space for survivors of childhood trauma. My website is vanzanalighthealing.com. If you'd like to check out my private work, my childhood mentoring sessions, you can find everything you need there and even book a complimentary session so I can help you better. So I have a lovely guest today that I'm very excited to introduce everyone to, and her name is Wendy Correa. Wendy, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Vandana. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Thank you for making the time to sit with us so we can get to know your story and how and what your mission is and how you have come so far in your own life and how you've overcome lots of hurdles, I'm sure, in your own childhood experiences. So I'm just going to share a little bit with whoever is meant to be on this podcast and listen and watch us and connect. So Wendy is a writer, a yogi, a hiker, as well as a licensed massage therapist. She's worked in the film, television, multimedia, and music industries in Los Angeles, and later as a radio DJ in Aspen, Colorado. Wendy holds a bachelor degree or bachelor degrees in psychology and theater arts. She's contributed articles to Mothering Magazine. She's also a wife and a mother and resides in Denver, Colorado. Wendy loves traveling to magical destinations with her family and wrote an amazing bestseller on Amazon book called My Pretty Baby. And this is Wendy's debut book. And just before we continue, just want to give your website to people so they'll have it and make note of it for after the podcast. So if you'd like to learn more about Wendy, you can visit her website, which is wendycorrea.com. That's WENDYB like boy, Correa, CORREA. And for fans of Educated and The Glass Castle, a former music industry insider's journey of healing from childhood trauma through spiritual practices and self-discovery to a place of peace with some incredible celebrity encounters along the way. So My Pretty Baby is a transformative memoir that chronicles Wendy's journey to her own healing journey from childhood trauma, including the death of her father when she was 7, emotionally distant older siblings. I could relate to that. Oh my goodness. A frequently neglectful mother, relate to that too. And an adventurous yet violent alcoholic stepfather. Wendy's story, My Pretty Baby, is a story of not belonging and the eventual healing that comes from building a chosen family. So after escaping her turbulent home life, Wendy's path of self-discovery takes her through Buddhism, meditation, plant medicine, yoga, nature, and Native American spirituality, as well as 12-step programs and psychotherapy. Native American sweat lodge and vision quest ceremonies further strengthened her sobriety and her mental well-being. And along the way, extraordinary experiences began to unfold where she finds herself standing on the Rose Bowl as stage singing Give Peace a Chance with rock and roll royalty, attending AA meetings with legendary musicians while working at A&M and Geffen Records. And even she got to hang out with her musical hero, which I'm sure everyone knows, Joni Mitchell. Amazing. So Wendy's life also took a new turn when she moved to Aspen and became a radio DJ and assistant to gonzo writer Hunter S. Thompson. And there she meets her future husband and begins to build the family she always longed for. But despite her newfound peace, she's repeatedly drawn back into her family of origin's dysfunction. It's only after her mother's death that Wendy uncovers a really painful family secret that finally answers her lifelong question: what really happened to my family? And I'm sure many of you can relate to that part, right? Who am I and what really happened to my family? And just overcoming so much of the difficult upbringing. So, Wendy, I just want to thank you again for sharing your personal life story and really being vulnerable and open with us, because we know that we need to talk about this and come out of denial, right? So many childhood survivors who have wound up with symptoms of complex PTSD, anxiety, depression, and more. They just haven't dealt with the past, right? Or they haven't forgiven, or there's blame or shame around their upbringing. So can you, let's open up this conversation from our heart spaces, right? Let's connect at heart spaces. And let me just begin by asking you, um, can you tell us a little bit about what happened to you, what your story was, what your childhood was like growing up?
Sure. I would say it began, idyllically, I thought, until I was 7 and my father died and of a heart condition. I remember him mostly in bed recovering. He had multiple heart attacks. And at that time, people didn't understand that they needed to help children process death and process grief. And no one really even spoke to me at all. No one said to me, "This is very
Yeah.
sad that your dad died, but he was very sick and the doctors couldn't do anything." They never said, "Your dad is so sorry he won't get to see you grow up." No one said to me, "You can always talk to your daddy. He's going to be in the moon and the stars, and you can always talk to him, and he's always going to look out for you." I mean, no one literally said anything. And so
Yeah.
I had this unprocessed sadness and loss and grief for most of my life, and was eventually a therapist in my 20s when I was working on a master's degree in clinical psychology, said to me, "I believe you've had a low-grade depression since your father died." And then a few years later, my mother brought into our family the man who would become my stepfather, and he was a violent alcoholic, and obviously with his
Mm.
own generational trauma and mental health issues. So it was trauma upon trauma. And I then grew up in a house where I did not feel safe, where I was terrified most of the time, where he had very trigger anger. So you never knew what was going to set him off. It could be the stupidest little
Mhm.
thing. And so I grew up with my fight or flight hormones on full blast for most of my life. And I didn't even know that until I got to college. And it was like the first time I felt like I could relax when I had left home. And so I grew up in this household of fear and terror and being threatened with, you know, getting killed. And so that I outlined that in my book. And then, my own struggles with healing and finding myself and overcoming addictions myself. And so that's what I outline in the book, is sort of like what happened to me, but then what I did with that and how I went about setting out to heal myself.
Wow. That's a lot.
That
It's a
is a
lot to
lot.
even hear and take in and process, myself being an empath. Many childhood survivors are become either
Yes,
people pleasers, caregivers, or empaths, or a combination of all of the above.
exactly. Yes.
when you left and you said that when you went to college, you were finally able to kind of relax your nervous system and breathe a breath of fresh air and just feel safe in your body. What happened after you went to college? I believe you said you became a psychologist and you got trained to become a psychologist, or what happened after you left home?
So I outline in my book, I left home and moved from Illinois to California, and I got myself into college because no one else in my family had gone to college. And it
Mm,
was when I was in Humboldt State, and all the friends that I met had grown up there, and they, were backpackers and hikers and spent a lot of time in nature. And so they introduced me to all of those things. And I outline in my book an event where we went hiking on a moonlight hike, and I could just feel myself relaxing for the first time. And that's when I also got introduced. I was majoring in psychology, and I wound up getting 2 degrees, one in psychology, one in theater arts, but I minored in Native American studies. And through my Native American studies, I also started to find a connection to nature. And then
mhm,
I did a 3 day Zen Buddhist session where I learned about meditation and Buddhism. And so I'm finding all of these ways to quiet my central nervous system and to get in touch with my inner self through
mhm,
meditation and all of these practices. And I just kept trying things. You know how they say it takes a
mhm.
village? Well, I used the
Yes.
entire village. I used everything that would soothe my central nervous system. And so, with my degrees, I did move to Los Angeles. And at one point, I was getting a master's in clinical psychology, which I did not finish. I was just about a quarter shy of finishing when my niece died. And I outlined
Mm.
that as well, that grief really just gutted my family. So I did not finish that clinical psychology degree. I did not become a psychologist. What I did do is get into the music industry and spent about a decade in the music industry. And it was in the music industry in Los Angeles that I also found sobriety and I started attending 12-step programs. But I also found a community in Los Angeles, believe it or not, of people who practice Native American spirituality with Native people and had been trained by Native people. And I spent 7 years practicing Native American spirituality and attending ceremonies. And that was going into the sweat lodge and going on a vision quest was what
Yep.
really helped me to stay sober. And at that time, though, when I was working on my master's degree, it was required that you also attend therapy as well. And so that through the therapist is when I really started to peel back my childhood and how those experiences really were still living in my body. They were still living in my central nervous system. They affected my health, they affected my relationships. So it's multi-layered what I went through and how I went about healing myself. I just kept adding more and more things, and I followed my bliss, as Joseph Campbell um, famously said, to find what felt good. And I've used all of those practices over the years, and then including healing and catharsis through writing. As again and again, I continued psychotherapy on and off for many years throughout my life as well.
That's really important. Even therapists need a therapist.
Exactly.
The whole planet needs to be in therapy, especially, the powers that be. So the leaders of our
Yes.
country who are also wounded adult children for the most part, just acting out and having lots of hissy fits. But really
Yes.
potentially dangerous ones. That's a whole nother
Exactly.
conversation.
Yes.
So tell us about Joni Mitchell. I'm really fascinated because I love Joni.
Well, I was living in Los Angeles and I hadn't gotten into the music industry at that point, but I had a good friend whose name is Boyd Elder, and you can Google him. He was a fabulous artist, and he was really famous for doing a lot of album covers for artists, especially people might know if you're a fan of the Eagles. He did their very
Mhm.
famous album cover of The Skull, I think.
Oh yeah, of
Yes,
course.
so that's Boyd. And so, of course, Boyd had lots of friends in the music industry, and I was always game to go meet his friends. One day he took me to Stephen Still's house of Crosby, Stills, and Nash,
Oh
and we
wow.
played pool. So, I,
Yeah.
I, I always loved meeting his friends. And one day, and I was waitressing, I was waitressing at a restaurant in Malibu called the Jetty, and we served barbecue. And I had, barbecue sauce all over my white shirt. And, I had worked a long shift and I was sweaty and I didn't even know if I had makeup on. And Boyd shows up at my work and he says, "Hey, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine." And I was like, "Okay." So we go driving up Pacific Coast Highway towards Malibu. But when we pulled into the Malibu colony, then I was like, "Oh my God, Boyd, where am I going? Who are you introducing me to? Look at me. I'm covered in barbecue sauce." And he says, "She doesn't care what you look like." And I'm like, "Who is she? Who is she?"
Oh,
And as he's ringing the doorbell, he's laughing and he says, "She doesn't care what you look like." And opens the door, and here is Joni Mitchell. And I just
oh
about,
wow.
you know, could not believe my eyes that here I was at Joni Mitchell's house. And I write about that because it was mind-boggling to me. I was not a famous person. I was not a musician. I was just a girl, from the Midwest trying to find her way in the world. And Joni,
Mm.
Boyd got on the phone, actually. He was calling Bob Dylan because they had been talking about Bobby this and Bobby that. And I had no
Oh
idea
my goodness.
what they were
Wow.
talking about until I realized, oh, they're talking about Bob Dylan. So Boyd got on the phone to call Bob Dylan, and Joni takes me around her amazing house, showing me not only her own incredible art collection, but also her Native American artifact collection. And then we eventually sat on the floor on her gorgeous Persian rug, and she said, "Do you know anything about the I Ching?" And yes, as a matter of fact, I do. At the time, I was very much into the I Ching and had studied a lot
Mhm.
about it. And we sat on her rug and threw the I Ching coins and read to each other, what our divination showed us. And that was just one of many times that I was so honored to have the opportunity to hang out with Joni Mitchell. But in my book, I just talk about that first time meeting her because it illustrates that the kindness that you might bestow upon another human being, you never know how it's going to affect them. And
True.
I was struggling at the time to understand my family. I didn't feel loved by anyone in my family except for my mother. And I was trying to figure out what happened to my family. And she boosted my self-worth. She mirrored to me. She was interested in me and she asked me questions. And
Hmm.
she reflected back to me my self-worth. And it boosted my confidence and my self-worth. And I thought, this is crazy. Joni Mitchell seems to really like me when there are members of my family that I feel like don't. Well, F them, because if Joni Mitchell likes me, then I'll take that. And so that's why I talk about that,
Wow.
because her kindness was so important to a young woman who was just trying to find her way. And I will forever be grateful for that.
Wow. It just feels like she was really there for you in a way that your own relatives were not able to be there for you. And she held this heart-centered, presence and openness and interest, like you said, and which is supposed to be naturally instinctive qualities of a parent or a caregiver. And so I'm really happy for you that you had such a beautiful awakening with her and that it really helped to raise your self-esteem and feel better about yourself and prove to yourself that it's not you, it's
Yes,
just trauma, but of course at that time in your life you might not have known as much as you do now, I'm sure.
of
And what
course.
happened after that? Like how many years later, how many years passed before you were guided to write your book, My Pretty Baby?
Well, of course, after that experience with Joni, then I did get into the music industry. I had been an activist and I was we were
Nice.
trying to get Proposition 12 passed in California, the Bilateral Nuclear Weapons Freeze Initiative, at about that same time. And I had done a lot of civil disobedience training. And then I was offered a position as doing security detail for Peace Sunday, which was an amazing concert at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. 100,000 people came, and every star that you can imagine, every political activist. You can Google it. It's just amazing. And I got to do backstage security. I was looking after Jackson Brown's little sister, Gracie. And then I got to stand on stage and I met um, a lot of the stars. And I outline this also in my book, that experience that I got to stand on a microphone with Timothy B. Schmidt from the Eagles and Margot Kidder, who had played Lois
Wow.
Lane in Superman, and sing Give
I
Peace a
remember that.
Chance. Yeah, so it was this amazing experience. And that's when I really wanted to be in the music industry. I wasn't a musician myself, but I was very organized and I wanted to be a part of this movement that people that had this platform of being famous musicians, they used it to try to save the world, to try to make the
Yes.
world better. And I wanted to be a part of that. And so I did eventually get into the music industry through a friend of a friend, and I worked for A&M and Geffen Records. And it was during that time that I spent more time with Joni, and I also got sober. And so I was sober for,
Congratulations.
yes, 38 years now. I have.
Wow.
But after that, I worked in the music industry for, as I said, about a decade, but then I moved to Aspen, Colorado to be a DJ on KSPN FM, Roaring Fork Radio. And I also became an assistant to the gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson, who, again, I write about Hunter. I was completely sober. Hunter decidedly was not. And
Mm,
so, it was interesting to be a completely sober person and to be his assistant. And in spite of
mm.
his notorious reputation, he was the most wonderful and kind and generous person to me. Again, he reflected back to me my self-worth. He really appreciated my organizational skills and my intellect, and I loved having these great conversations with him. And that was also, though, so I met my husband who called in to request a song on KSPN FM, and I met my husband in Aspen, Colorado. And we
Mm.
would then leave Aspen to move to Chicago, where my husband um, got a position as an architect, and we would have our son Mateo, and it would be many years. I wanted just to focus on raising my son and making sure that he had the kind of childhood that I did not have. And so I spent years just as a mother, not just because to me it's one of the most important things that you can do.
Yes.
um,
Yep.
but it wasn't until my son was in high school that then I started to write chapters of my book. And,
Mhm.
here we are now. It's my book came out
Mhm.
November 4th of 2025 and is getting a lot of attention because it's hitting a chord with, a lot of people because I realized as I was writing my book, I knew that I wanted to write it, but I wasn't really planning to publish it. I just needed to sit
For
down
yourself.
and for myself and write out to try to understand what happened to my family, to cut through the Gordian knot of complexity. And I really wanted to uncover the generational trauma, but also family secrets. And I started digging through and finding more and more family secrets. And I cannot give away the arc of the big one that I uncovered because I don't want to give that away for the readers. But it was while I was already
Yeah.
writing my book that I uncovered the big family secret. And so then I was writing my book for my own catharsis, and my editor at one point said to me, "You are going to publish this, right?" And I was like, "Am I?" And then I realized this isn't just my memoir. This is
Mhm.
everyone's memoir. This is everyone's story. And even if you have not experienced childhood trauma yourself, 64% of adults have. So that means either your partner, your best friend, your neighbor, your boss, someone you know has experienced some form of adverse
Mhm.
childhood experiences. And it turns out that childhood trauma is a public health issue. And so
Yes.
I want my pretty baby to be a vehicle, a call to action so that you and I, can have these conversations about childhood trauma without shame, without guilt,
Yes.
and also without blame or retribution. I believe
Mhm.
that My Pretty Baby is a vehicle to have a conversation so that we can be cycle breakers. And especially if you have children,
Yes.
the biggest gift that you can give your child is to be a cycle breaker yourself. So,
That's exactly the work I do. So thank you. There are no
yes,
accidents why you're my guest today.
thank
Ancestral
you.
cycle breakers, we all have the ability, the power to make that choice, to make a conscious choice so that our descendants don't suffer,
Right. It's not
needlessly and we
easy.
don't pass that trauma. No, it's not
It's
easy.
not
I'm a
easy
mom too. It's not
absorbing
easy.
absorbing that. I mean, you have to be willing to be a cycle breaker. You have to be willing to say the trauma ends with me. And I am now going to absorb and
Exactly.
process the generational trauma that's been handed down to me. And even, not just what I experienced as a child, but what my mom, my father, my,
Mhm.
stepfather, the trauma that they did not process. And that's
Seven
why
generations behind and seven generations forward.
That's right. And
It's
that's
it's
why,
systemic, right? So,
yes. And that's why it
yeah.
took a whole village because it's a
Yep.
lot of trauma to process.
Yes.
And I will be doing this for the rest of my life. It's not like
Yep.
it's all done.
It's not one
No,
and done.
no, it is
Definitely
not.
not. It would be nice though, but it's not.
No, it will
Yeah.
be a process for my whole life. Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, so a big part of what I do is I facilitate family constellation type of therapy with people. And it's all about generational trauma and saying, having these dialogues with our ancestors, also the forgotten ones that we never even knew, and getting to finding out the original trauma and then having the conversation, listening and putting yourself in their shoes also, like holding a space of curiosity and compassion for the first ancestors that passed on this trauma. Also finding an ancestral guide who actually is like the healer of the family, but we can become the healer of our family. We can become our like a living light ancestor. And all these things were not taught, but also
Right.
saying, having the difficult conversation, which actually is the only thing that's going to liberate us from the cycles or the patterns, the chains of suffering, is saying something like, you know, you had a difficult fate, but your pain, it ends with me. And
Yes.
um, I send this back to you or to wherever it came from with love. And your pain doesn't define me. Like, I don't have to
Right.
carry this pain because it doesn't belong to me. And I think making peace so that the whole family can rest and that the generational trauma imprints don't have to move forward anymore. So everyone, all the ancestors and your family members can all take a deep breath. And this is the
Right.
most important sacred work that everyone should do or everyone can do. But I think everyone has to find their sweet spot. For you, it's, and also for me, Native American spirituality has, shamanism has played a big part in my life too. Um, but yeah, I wanted to ask you, where'd you get the title, Pretty Baby, My Pretty Baby? Because I love the title. That really drew
Well,
me in, actually.
so the reason that it is named My Pretty Baby is, and going back to the wound, this is the wound that was originally inflicted in my family of origin. So when I was 25, I was living in Northern California. Oh, no, I was living in Los Angeles by that time. I went back to Illinois to visit, and I went to visit my sister, who I had always had a difficult relationship with. And she seemed to resent me and was very cold towards me. And um, she had a very trigger, anger as well. And she was yelling at my young niece about something. And I came to my niece's side to say, aren't you being harsh? And she turned on me and said, "Oh, you think you're so perfect. You're just like mom. Get off your pedestal."
Mm,
And meanwhile, I was like,
mm,
I actually don't think I'm perfect. I'm, just struggling to love myself and do not think I'm perfect.
mm.
And she said, "Do you know what mom said when she brought you home from the hospital?" And I'm like, "Of course not, because I was a newborn. And why are you telling me this now? I'm 25 and she was 37." And
Oh,
she said to me, a 12-year-old girl, that she said, "I finally got my pretty baby."
oh,
And
wow.
I was shocked, like, "Oh my
Amazing.
God, that's horrible, Sandy. I can't believe mom would say that." And she
Oh, I'm
said,
getting the
yes.
chills now.
She
That's
said she
crazy.
finally got her pretty baby, that I, you know, um, was looked like a drowned rat, and our brother, who was 7 years older than me, was sickly and colicky. And it was a horrible fight. And she used to say to me, you're the milkman's daughter, and just horrible things. So I went back to my mom to say, "Mom, I just had this fight with her, and did you really say you finally got your pretty baby?" And my mom was like, "Oh, I didn't say that. I probably said, I finally got my best baby." And it was like, "Oh, well, mom,
That's even worse.
that's not much better." And she goes, "No, I didn't mean anything. It's just because
Right, of course.
because your sister was in an incubator for a month. She was, you know, sickly,
Mm.
and your brother was sickly, and you were born chubby, and you had dimples in your arms and legs." Well, so
Oh,
then I
wow.
realized at 25, that was a wound. Whether my mother meant it or not, that was a wound of my
Yeah.
sisters. That set us up for never being
Yep.
able to be close. It set her up to resent me and to be jealous of me. And here I was, 25, just learning this story. And at 37, my sister still was suffering from that wound. So that's my pretty baby. It's me.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you, Wendy, for sharing the name, the beautiful name of your book. It really is. it really intrigued me and it got me really, really curious. It almost feels when I first heard about, like when I first looked at your book, the title felt so familiar to me. And then I thought, oh, there's something here that I need to talk to Wendy and find out her story. So thank you, Wendy, for joining today. Is there any last words of encouragement or just little nuggets of wisdom that you would like to share with whoever is meant to tune in and connect today?
Well, yes, I did want to say that while I was writing my memoir, I was also reading all of the latest research, which I cannot believe in 2025. It's only in the last 10 years that
Mm-hmm.
many, many books have come out, like
Mm-hmm.
Nadine Burke Harris. She wrote The Deepest Well, and she developed the Adverse Childhood Experiences quiz, which anyone can Google. It's just 10 questions to get a score of where you land
Mm-hmm.
on the adverse childhood experiences spectrum. And that can
Mm-hmm.
tell you how much healing basically you really need to do. And she found that at least a third, and today probably more, of adults have at least one of 10 adverse childhood
Mm-hmm.
experience, and 1 in 6 has four
Mm-hmm.
or more. And that the trauma that you carry from childhood can increase your risk for addiction, mental
Yep.
illness, chronic disease. And so, therefore, childhood trauma, is a public health issue. And she found that
Yes.
if someone has a score or 6 or more ACEs, um, your life expectancy can decrease by 20 years if you don't find some
Help.
ways to heal. I have a score of 7, but I believe because I intuitively was drawn over the past 4 decades to find ways to heal, that I have been doing the work. So, My Pretty Baby is also like a guidebook for people who maybe don't know where to start. And it turns out that these intuitive modalities that I sought out are actually what scientists are saying we can do
Yes.
to heal. So, besides psychotherapy, which is very important, we do need somatic healing. So, somatic healing is going to be anything with the body. If it's
Yes.
massage,
And the breath.
yoga, breath work,
Yes.
meditation,
Yes.
hiking, dancing, putting on music, and singing. We need the somatic healing in addition to the psychotherapy. And all of those practices that I outline in my book are things that people can easily do, like in your own home, that don't have to cost you any money. But then I also use the spiritual piece, the Buddhism and the Native American spirituality, which it turns out
Yes.
are very similar in a lot of ways. And
Yes.
obviously people can find their own ways to connect with their own spirituality. And so
Absolutely.
I want my readers to take away that although trauma is universal, so is healing. And telling the truth about what happened to you isn't about blame or retribution. It's about breaking
Mm-hmm.
cycles and healing. And so that's,
Yes.
um, I think that we all, as a society, we need to have these conversations. And thank you so much for
Of
providing this
course.
space and my opportunity to share with the listeners about My Pretty Baby. And I hope everyone will. Um, the book is available, the Kindle is available, as well as the audio book, which I narrated myself.
Beautiful. I'm an audiobook narrator too, so if you ever write another book, I'm available. No, I'm
Awesome.
just kidding.
That's
But
fabulous.
yeah, I love doing voiceovers. I also wanted to share, so it's on Amazon, My Pretty Baby, so people can just hop over to Amazon and find your book there, right?
Absolutely. It's a number one
And or your
Amazon.
audiobook, right,
Yes,
as well.
it's
I love Audible. It's like one of my
on
favorite
Audible.
things because sometimes I'm too tired to just like hold a book and read it because my eyes are so tired from being on my computer all day. So I will
Right?
listen because sometimes, and depending on the quality of the voice of the narrator, it could go either way. I've gotten a few audiobooks on Audible that had an AI
Oh
as
gosh,
the
no.
narrator, and that was awful.
No, that
So
would be
I'm really
awful.
glad to hear that it's your voice because it's your
It's my
story. It
voice.
has to be
It's
your
my
voice, it has to
story.
be
Yes.
told in your voice. And what you said before, I want to just really agree 100% that the number one most important first step to healing is coming out of denial. And that I did all my inner child work, most of it with ACA, which is another 12-step
Hmm.
program. It's adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. They have meetings
Yes.
all over the world in like every country. I'm sure you're familiar. And then
Yes.
they have this laundry list, which identifies 14 traits of the adult child of either an alcoholic or a dysfunctional family, because both behaviors, whether your parent ever took a drink or whoever raised you or not, that's called para alcoholism. So like the
Hmm.
behaviors are very similar, very kind of chaotic and unpredictable. So I just wanted to ask people to have a look, like just to make a suggestion at the adultchildren.org laundry list. They identify 14 traits of an adult child. An adult child basically just means that a child who grows up to be an adult but still carries the wounds from their childhood.
Absolutely.
And so all of these things, in addition to what Wendy was mentioning, are really, really important. And to be in community, not to isolate. It's probably like the most harmful thing you can do is to keep it inside, to keep it to yourself. So, if any of this information was helpful or meaningful, please reach out to Wendy. Just say your website again.
www.wendyb. Correa. And you can also find me on Instagram at Wendy B. Correa and on Facebook at just Wendy Correa. And my pretty baby actually spent a month as an Amazon number one bestseller in alcoholism, and the Audible and book were also number one for a while in family dysfunction. So I got to call my son and say,
Congratulations.
honey, we're number one in family dysfunction. So we have a good, thank
Congratulations.
you. We
That's
have a good
awesome.
giggle about that. But number one Amazon bestseller. I'm very
Yay.
proud. Thank you very much. Yes.
Awesome. So the more of us that speak about the importance of healing unhealed, unresolved, unprocessed childhood trauma, the better off our world will be. And as you said before,
100%.
it's over 64%, if not even higher,
Yes.
statistically speaking, of people who actually experience those adverse childhood experiences, but most of us don't even know it. And so
Yes.
when we struggle, we blame ourselves instead of realizing like, oh, okay, so it's not me. I'm just a survivor, right? Which is a
Exactly.
very important title to wear. It's very heroic because of the survival responses that has actually kept you alive. That's actually kept you, in a body. So it's really important to do the work with someone that you feel safe with, that you trust, whether it's a therapist or a healer or a shaman, but just don't try to do it all on your own. You know,
Right.
it
And don't
takes a
isolate.
village. Exactly. So thank
Yes.
you. And everyone, if you'd like to contact me and set up an inner child session, you can visit me, or a family constellation session or an ancestral medicine session, any or all of those. You can find me at vanzanalighthealing.com. And thank you so much for joining the Adult Child in Recovery podcast, Wendy. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and much luck with your book. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so much.
much.
What a pleasure to be
All
with you
right.
today.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you, Wendy. Take care.